Hello, gentle souls wandering through the quiet hours of night. Come close, settle in wherever you find yourself in this vast world, and let me share with you a story that has waited decades to be told. Perhaps you're listening from a warm room as snow falls outside your window, or maybe you're in a place where the sun still lingers. Wherever you are, I'm grateful for your presence here tonight. This is a story about love that transcended the coldest place on earth, about letters that traveled impossible distances, and about the profound capacity of the human heart to find connection even in the most isolated corners of our world. It's a story that whispers to us about courage, loss, and the beautiful fragility of human hope. Before we begin, do share in the comments where you're listening from. I love imagining our little community scattered across the globe, connected by these stories that bind us together in the gentle darkness. And if these whispered histories bring you comfort, please consider supporting this channel. There are so many more untold stories waiting in the archives, stories that deserve to be shared with hearts like yours. Our tale begins in the winter of 1957, in a place so remote that it existed beyond the edges of most maps, beyond the reach of telephone lines or radio waves, beyond everything except the endless white silence of Antarctica. Here, on a rocky outcrop that the Chilean government had designated as Yelcho Station, 12 men lived through the polar night in a collection of prefabricated buildings that seemed impossibly small against the immensity of the ice. The station was named for the ship that had rescued Ernest Shackleton's men from Elephant Island 40 years earlier, a name that carried the weight of hope and impossible rescue, of survival against odds that should have crushed the human spirit. It was, perhaps, a prophetic choice. Among the 12 men at Yelcho Station was Dr. Mateo Herrera, a glaciologist from the University of Chile, who had come to Antarctica to study ice core samples that could reveal secrets locked in frozen time. Mateo was 34 years old, with gentle brown eyes that seemed to hold depths of patience, and hands that moved with the precise delicacy of someone who had learned to read stories written in layers of ancient ice. Back in Santiago, living in a small apartment near the university, was Sofia Morales, a literature professor who had filled her life with books and students and the quiet rhythms of academic seasons. She was 31, with dark hair that caught the light when she laughed, and a voice that could make even the driest literary analysis sound like poetry. She had been engaged to Mateo for 8 months when he left for Antarctica, and they had planned to marry upon his return. Neither of them knew, as they said their goodbye at the Santiago airport on a rainy March morning, that it would be 14 months before they would hold each other again. Neither of them knew that the letters they would write to each other would become something far more than simple correspondence. They would become lifelines stretched across impossible distances, carrying not just words, but the very essence of their hearts through the longest, darkest winter either of them had ever known. The postal system that connected Antarctica to the rest of the world in 1957 was a marvel of determination and logistics that few people ever thought about. Mail destined for Yelcho Station traveled first by commercial flight from Santiago to Buenos Aires, then by military transport to the Argentine Research Station at Base Belgrano, then by dog sled across hundreds of miles of ice sheet, then by snowcat to the coastal pickup point, and finally by helicopter when weather permitted, or by skiplane if the helicopter couldn't make the journey. Under the best circumstances, a letter took 6 weeks to travel from Santiago to Yelcho Station. Under normal circumstances, it took 8 to 10 weeks. Under the harsh circumstances of an Antarctic winter, with storms that could last for weeks and temperatures that made metal brittle and fuel freeze solid, letters could take 4 months to reach their destination, or they might not arrive at all. The men at Yelcho Station received mail deliveries perhaps once every 2 months, weather permitting. Each delivery was an event that transformed the mood of the entire station. Letters from home were read and reread, shared and discussed, treated with the reverence that holy texts receive in monasteries. They were proof that a world beyond the ice still existed, evidence that the men had not been forgotten by everything warm and human and alive. Mateo's first letter to Sofia was written on April 15th, 3 weeks after his arrival at Yelcho Station, and it captured the mixture of wonder and homesickness that marked his early days on the ice. My dearest Sophia, I write this by the light of the midnight sun, which hangs low on the horizon like a great orange lamp that never quite decides to set. The landscape here is beyond anything I imagined, not just white, but every shade of white that exists, shifting and changing with the light until it seems alive. Yesterday, I saw blue shadows cast by ice formations, purple mountains in the distance, and pink clouds that looked like they were made of spun sugar. The work is fascinating. The ice cores were extracting contained air bubbles from thousands of years ago, literally breathing the atmosphere that existed when Christ walked the earth. Each sample is a page from a book about climate that was written before humans learned to read. But Sophia, my love, the beauty here is cold beauty. It doesn't warm the heart the way your smile does. I find myself thinking about your laugh when the wind howls around our buildings at night. I think about the way you hum when you're grading papers, and how you always make that little sound of surprise when you read something that delights you. The other men are good company, but they're not you. Lewis, our meteorologist, has been here before and says the hardest part comes when the sun disappears completely in May. He says it's not just the darkness, it's the way the darkness changes you inside. I'm not worried, though. I carry your light with me. Kiss your mother for me, and tell her I'm eating well and staying warm. Kiss yourself for me too, twice, once on each cheek, and know that I'm counting the days until I can do it myself. All my love, Mateo. Sophia received this letter on June 3rd, 7 weeks after it was written. On an autumn day in Santiago, when the leaves were turning gold and the air carried the first hint of winter. She was in her office at the university, preparing for her afternoon seminar on Neruda, when the mail clerk knocked on her door with the distinctive blue envelope that indicated international mail. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, not from cold, but from the intensity of longing that hit her like a physical force. She read the letter 3 times before she could bring herself to put it down, and when she finally did, she found tears on her cheeks that she hadn't realized she was crying. That evening, Sofia sat at the small writing desk in her apartment and composed her reply, writing by the light of the lamp that Mateo had given her for her birthday, a warm, amber glow that seemed to hold a piece of him within it. My darling Mateo, your letter arrived today like a gift from another world. I read it in my office, then again at lunch, then once more when I got home, and each time I discovered something new in it, some detail that helped me see you more clearly across all those impossible miles. You write about cold beauty, but your words are warm. They carry your voice so clearly that I can almost hear you speaking them. When you describe the ice cores and their ancient air, I think about how you see poetry in science, how you find stories in places where others see only data. Santiago is beautiful now in its autumn way. The jacaranda trees are blooming purple along our street, and the evening light has that golden quality that always makes me think of honey. But the beauty feels incomplete without you here to share it. I find myself saving up small observations. The way the light falls through the cafe window where we used to have coffee, the sound of rain on the roof, the smell of bread from the bakery, storing them up like treasures to share with you when you return. I've started reading your favorite book again, the one about polar exploration that you left on the nightstand. I never understood before why those stories fascinated you, but now I think I'm beginning to see. There's something about humans pushing into impossible places, about the way extremes reveal what we're really made of. The students ask about you. They remember the guest lecture you gave last semester about ice and time, and several of them have decided to minor in geology because of it. You touched their imaginations the way you touched mine. I sleep with your pillow still on the bed, and sometimes in the morning, for just a moment, I forget you're gone. Those moments are both cruel and precious. Come back to me safely, my love. The world is less bright without you in it. Forever yours, Sofia. The rhythm of their correspondence developed slowly, shaped by the constraints of distance and the irregular schedule of mail deliveries. Letters crossed in transit, creating conversations that unfolded across months, where responses to questions arrived long after the questions themselves had been forgotten, where the flow of thoughts and feelings followed the irregular heartbeat of Antarctic logistics rather than the natural cadence of intimate conversation. By May, as Mateo had predicted, the sun disappeared from the sky above Yelcho Station, and the 12 men entered the long polar night that would last psychological impact was immediate and profound. Men who had been cheerful and talkative became quiet and introspective. Tempers grew short over minor inconveniences. The warm yellow light of the station's interior began to feel artificial and thin, like a stage set that couldn't quite convince anyone that the world beyond the walls wasn't infinite darkness. Mateo's letters from this period carried a different tone, more introspective, more vulnerable, touched by the particular kind of loneliness that comes from living in a place where the natural rhythms of day and night have been suspended. My beloved Sofia, it's been dark for 6 weeks now. Not just dark like a cloudy day, but dark like the inside of a closed book, dark like the bottom of a deep well. The stars are magnificent, clearer and brighter than anything you can imagine, but their cold comfort. They make the universe feel vast and empty rather than beautiful. I dream about sunlight now. Not just any sunlight, but specific moments of light. The way it used to stream through your classroom window during your morning lectures. The way it caught the dust motes dancing above your desk when you worked late. I dream about the golden hour before sunset when we used to walk along the river, when the whole city seemed painted in warm amber. The work continues. We've extracted ice cores from depths that represent 10,000 years of climate history. Each layer tells a story about seasons that came and went before human civilization began, about ice ages and warm periods and volcanic eruptions that changed the color of sunsets on the other side of the world. There's something humbling about holding evidence of such deep time in your hands. But I confess, my love, that some days I feel like we're living in a story about the end of the world. The wind never stops here. It howls and moans around our buildings with voices that sound almost human, as if the ice itself is trying to speak. At night, when I can't sleep, I listen to it and think about all the explorers who came before us, who heard these same voices and wondered if they would ever see home again. Lewis tells me this is normal, that the polar night affects everyone this way. He says the mind starts to play tricks, starts to see patterns and meanings that aren't really there. Maybe he's right, but I know one thing that isn't a trick of my imagination. The way your love feels real and warm even here, even in this place that seems designed to make humans forget what warmth means. I carry your photograph everywhere now. The one from our picnic last summer, where you're laughing at something I said, your hair wild from the wind. The other men tease me about it, but gently. They all have their own talismans, their own ways of remembering that there's a world beyond the ice. Write to me, my darling. Your letters are the only things that make the darkness feel temporary. With all my love and longing, Mateo. Sofia's response to this letter revealed the depth of her empathy and the way she was learning to reach across the impossible distance with more than just words. My dearest Mateo, your letter about the darkness arrived on a day when Santiago was so bright it hurt to look at the sky. I sat in the garden reading your words, surrounded by spring flowers and the sound of children playing in the street. And I felt the strangest sensation, as if I were experiencing two worlds at once, the warm one around me and the cold one you described. I want to send you light, my love, not just in my words, but actual light. I've started collecting it for you. Each morning when the sun comes up, I sit by the window with my coffee, and I try to memorize exactly what the light looks like, the way it changes color as it climbs the sky, the way it transforms ordinary objects into small miracles. I store these moments in my memory like gifts I'm saving for you. I've also started keeping a daily record of small, beautiful things, thinking that when you read about them, they might help balance the vastness and emptiness you describe. Today, I saw an old man feeding pigeons in the plaza, and the birds made patterns around his feet like living flowers. Yesterday, a little girl at the bus stop was singing to herself, making up words to a melody I didn't recognize. The jacaranda tree outside my window has started blooming, and the purple flowers fall like confetti when the wind blows. You write about feeling like you're living in a story about the end of the world, but I think you're living in a story about discovery. You're seeing things that few humans have ever seen, touching evidence of time, so deep it makes our brief lives seem like flickers of light. There's something sacred about that work, something that connects you to the largest rhythms of the earth. I showed your letter to my mother, only the parts you'd want her to see, and she said something that surprised me. She said she thought you were becoming a monk of sorts, that Antarctica was your monastery, and the ice was teaching you things you could never learn in the warm world. She said monks throughout history had gone to difficult places to learn about God and themselves, and maybe you were doing something similar. I think she's right. When you come back, you'll be carrying wisdom from the edges of the world. You'll have stories that no one else can tell, insights that can only come from living so close to the elemental forces of the planet. But until then, know that I'm here, holding the warm world steady for you. I'm tending our garden of memories, keeping our future alive and growing. The distance between us is real, but the love that crosses it is more real. Dream of sunlight, my darling, and know that I dream of you. All my love, Sofia. The mail delivery that brought Sofia's letter to Yelcho Station arrived in early July, during one of the worst storms of the winter. The helicopter pilot, who made the dangerous flight through winds that gusted to 80 miles per hour later, said he'd never attempted anything so foolhardy. But something about the radio operator's description of how badly the men needed their mail convinced him to try. When the mail bag was brought into the station's common room, the 12 men gathered around it with the reverence of congregants witnessing a miracle. Letters were distributed in order of arrival date, a ritual that had developed over the months to ensure fairness and build anticipation. The process took almost an hour, with each man's name called in turn, and the return addresses read aloud, so everyone could share vicariously in the connections to the outside world. Mateo received 3 letters in that delivery. One from Sofia, one from his sister in Valparaiso, and one from his thesis advisor at the university. But it was Sofia's letter that he opened first, there in the common room with the wind howling outside and the generator humming in the basement. The warm yellow light making everything feel like a scene from a movie about people living at the edge of the world. The effect of Sofia's words on Mateo was visible to everyone in the room. His shoulders relaxed, his face softened, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled, not the forced smile of someone trying to maintain morale, but the unconscious smile of someone who had just been reminded that he was deeply loved. The other men, recognizing the sacred nature of the moment, quietly dispersed to read their own letters in private, leaving Mateo alone with Sofia's words and the connection they created across 10,000 miles of ice and ocean and sky. That night, Mateo wrote what would later be remembered as one of his most beautiful letters, composed by lamplight, while the wind outside performed its endless symphony of solitude. My precious Sofia, your letter arrived today like a piece of summer sunshine wrapped in paper. I read it 3 times in the common room, then brought it to my bunk, and read it twice more by flashlight under the blankets, like a child reading a forbidden book after bedtime. Your idea of collecting light for me is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done. As I read your descriptions, I could actually see the morning sun climbing your window, could picture the purple jacaranda flowers falling like confetti. For 20 minutes, while I read your letter, I wasn't in Antarctica anymore. I was sitting beside you in that garden, feeling the warm air and hearing the children play. Your mother's words about monasteries struck something deep in me. She's right, I think. This place is teaching me things I never expected to learn. Not just about ice and climate, but about solitude, about what humans need to survive, about the way the heart adapts to impossible conditions. I've learned, for instance, that love is not diminished by distance. If anything, the separation has shown me how much space you occupy in my soul. Here, surrounded by emptiness, I can feel the exact shape of the place you fill in my life. It's like a warm room in the center of my chest, a place where your laugh lives, and your voice whispers, and your touch is always just a memory away from becoming real again. I've also learned that beauty exists everywhere, even here in this place that seems designed to strip away everything unnecessary. Tonight, the aurora australis painted the sky in curtains of green and blue and purple light that moved like living things across the darkness. It was so beautiful it made my chest ache, and I wished desperately that you were here to see it with me. But then I realized that in a way, you were seeing it. Your love is teaching me to see beauty through your eyes as well as my own. When I watch the aurora, I imagine how you would describe it, what metaphors you would find, what poems it would remind you of. Your vision has become part of mine, my darling, and it makes everything more beautiful. The work continues to fascinate me. We've reached ice that fell as snow 15,000 years ago during the last ice age. The air trapped in these cores was breathed by mammoths and saber-toothed cats, by early humans who had just learned to control fire. When I extract these samples, I feel connected to the deepest rhythms of the planet, to cycles of change that make our individual lives seem like single heartbeats in the vast pulse of geological time. There's comfort in that perspective, strange as it might sound. Our separation is temporary, a tiny moment in the larger story of our lives together. The ice teaches patience. It teaches that the most important changes happen slowly, that permanence is found not in avoiding change, but in maintaining love through all the seasons of transformation. Only 3 more months until the sun returns, my love. Only 5 more months until I fly home to your arms. I'm counting each day, but I'm also learning to be present in this extraordinary place, to let it teach me everything it wants me to know, so that when I come back to you, I'll be worthy of the love that has sustained me through this long winter. Sleep well in your warm bed, my darling. Dream of spring, and know that I dream of you. Forever yours, Mateo. As winter deepened at Yelcho Station, the psychological challenges intensified. The confined space, the artificial light, the constant presence of the same 11 companions, and the knowledge that no escape was possible, until spring began to wear on everyone's nerves. Small irritations became major conflicts. The sound of someone chewing became unbearable. Personal habits that had been merely annoying became sources of genuine anger. Dr. Raul Mendoza, the expedition's physician and psychologist, had predicted these developments and had prepared strategies to help the team maintain their mental health through the darkest months. He organized group activities, card tournaments, storytelling sessions, language lessons, where team members taught each other phrases in their native dialects. He instituted mandatory exercise periods and tried to maintain some variety in their routine. But the most effective intervention proved to be the letters from home. Men who had been sullen and withdrawn would emerge from reading their mail transformed, reconnected to their sense of purpose and identity. The letters served as more than communication. They were lifelines to sanity, reminders that the outside world existed and was waiting for their return. Mateo found himself becoming the station's unofficial morale officer, not through any formal appointment, but through the simple fact that Sofia's letters consistently lifted his spirits in ways that were visible to everyone around him. When he read her words, the warmth and joy that filled him seemed to radiate outward, affecting the mood of the entire group. The other men began to look forward to his letters, almost as much as their own, knowing that Sofia's loving presence somehow reached even them through the medium of Mateo's happiness. Sofia, unknowing of this larger role her letters played, but intuitive enough to sense that her words carried more weight than usual, began to write not just for Mateo, but with an awareness that her voice might be one of the few feminine perspectives reaching the isolated station. Her letters became more expansive, including news about the city, observations about the changing seasons, and stories about her students and colleagues, creating a rich tapestry of connection to the world beyond the ice. In August, as the first hint of dawn appeared on the horizon after months of darkness, Sofia wrote a letter that would become legendary among the men of Yelcho Station. My dearest Mateo, as I write this, spring is arriving in Santiago with the kind of gentle persistence that makes me think of hope itself. The jacaranda trees are heavy with buds. The air smells of warming earth and new grass. And there's a quality to the light that makes everything look as if it's been painted fresh each morning. I know that your sun is also returning, that after months of darkness, you're beginning to see the horizon again. I imagine how that first light must feel after so long, not just brightness, but proof that the world follows patterns larger than our individual experiences, that what seems permanent is actually just a season that must eventually change. I want to tell you about something I witnessed yesterday that made me think of you and your companions living at the edge of the world. I was walking through the central market, buying vegetables for dinner, when I noticed a group of street musicians setting up their instruments near the fountain. They were an unlikely ensemble: an elderly man with a battered guitar, a young woman with a violin, a middle-aged businessman with a harmonica, and a teenage boy with a drum made from a plastic bucket. They had clearly never played together before. They spent several minutes tuning and adjusting, trying to find a key they could all work with, negotiating tempos and rhythms. It should have been cacophonous, this random collection of people with their mismatched instruments and different levels of skill. But then something magical happened. The old man started playing a simple melody, something that sounded like a folk song, though I didn't recognize it. The woman with the violin found a harmony. The businessman added a bass line with his harmonica, and the boy began a rhythm that tied everything together. Within minutes, they had created something beautiful, something that drew a crowd of listeners who threw coins into the guitar case, not out of pity, but out of genuine appreciation. What struck me most was how they listened to each other. Each musician was constantly adjusting their playing, making space for the others, finding ways to support the whole while still expressing their individual voice. They had created, spontaneously and temporarily, a perfect example of human cooperation and mutual respect. I thought of you and your 11 companions living together in that small space through the long winter. I imagine you've had to learn similar skills, how to harmonize with personalities that might naturally clash, how to create something beautiful and sustainable out of diverse individual needs and perspectives. I also thought about how love works, how we learn to adjust our rhythms to match someone else's while still remaining ourselves. These months of separation have taught me that love isn't just emotion. It's a skill, a practice, a way of listening and responding, and making space for another person's needs while honoring your own. When you come home, we'll have to learn to play together again, to find our rhythm after months of enforced solo performances. But I'm not worried about that. Love, like music, has its own wisdom. The melody between us is strong enough to survive any interruption. I visited your mother last week, and she sends her love. She's been knitting you a sweater for your return, something warm and red that she says will help chase away any lingering chill from your polar winter. She also gave me a message to pass along. She's proud of you, proud that her son has the courage to go to the ends of the earth in service of knowledge and discovery. Your students ask about you too. I've started giving guest lectures in the geology department about the human side of scientific exploration, using your letters with your permission. I hope to help them understand that science is not just about data and theories, but about real people pushing into unknown territories, asking questions that matter. Only 2 more months, my love. Only 2 more months until you board the plane in Punta Arenas and begin your journey home. I'm counting the days, but I'm also trying to savor this time of anticipation, this period of knowing that our reunion is approaching like spring itself, inevitable, precious, worth waiting for. The sun is returning to your world, darling, and soon you'll be returning to mine. Until then, know that you carry my heart with you across all that ice and darkness and impossible distance. With all my love and all my longing, Sofia. This letter reached Yelcho Station in mid-September, carried by the first helicopter flight that had been possible in 3 weeks due to continuing storms. The delivery coincided with the return of genuine daylight, not just the pale hint of dawn they had been seeing, but actual sunlight that cast shadows and warmed the air and made the ice sparkle like fields of diamonds. The psychological effect of returning light, combined with the arrival of fresh mail, transformed the mood at the station completely. Men who had been quiet and withdrawn suddenly became talkative and energetic. Projects that had been abandoned during the worst of the winter were resumed with enthusiasm. The daily routine took on new meaning as everyone began to focus on the approaching end of their isolation. Mateo read Sofia's letter aloud to the group, as had become his custom, with her longer, more descriptive messages. The story of the street musicians resonated particularly strongly with men who had learned their own lessons about cooperation and harmony under extreme conditions. Several of them commented on Sofia's insight about love as a skill that required practice and adjustment. And Lewis, the expedition's weathered meteorologist, surprised everyone by saying that Sofia should write a book about the psychology of relationships. That woman understands something important, Lewis said, puffing on the pipe he only lit on special occasions. Most people think love is just feeling, but she knows it's work too. Good work, the kind that makes you a better person, but work all the same. The men spent that evening sharing stories about their own relationships, talking more openly than they had in months about the people they were missing and the lives they were eager to return to. It was a conversation that had been impossible during the depths of winter, when homesickness felt too raw to examine directly, but which now felt healing and celebratory as their exile approached its end. Mateo's response to Sofia's letter was written over several days, as his duties preparing for the station's closure and the complex logistics of packing up months of scientific work left him little time for extended writing sessions. But the letter that finally emerged was his longest and most reflective, a meditation on love and separation, and the strange gifts that isolation can bring. My beloved Sofia, your letter about the street musicians has been read and reread by everyone at the station. It's been passed around like a piece of precious literature, quoted in conversations, referenced in ways that make me both proud and slightly embarrassed. The men here have adopted you as a kind of patron saint of wisdom about human relationships. Your metaphor about love as music, about learning to harmonize while maintaining individual voice, captures something I've been struggling to put into words about these months of separation. We've been learning to play a love song across impossible distance, adjusting our rhythms to account for the delays and interruptions, finding ways to stay connected despite all the forces trying to pull us apart. And you're right that we'll need to learn to play together again when I return. I'm not the same person who left Santiago 7 months ago. The ice and the darkness and the profound solitude have changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'm quieter now, more patient, more aware of how precious ordinary moments really are. I've learned to find contentment in simple things: a letter from home, a glimpse of the aurora, the sound of wind that isn't quite strong enough to be dangerous. The work here is nearing completion, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. Our ice core samples represent the most comprehensive climate record ever extracted from this part of Antarctica. The data will help scientists understand how the Earth's climate has changed over the past 20,000 years, how ice ages begin and end, how human activity is affecting the planet's temperature. But more than the scientific achievements, I'm proud of how we've lived together as a community. 12 men from different backgrounds, different regions of Chile, different social classes and educational levels, thrown together in circumstances that could have bred conflict and resentment. Instead, we've created something that feels like family. We've learned to support each other through the dark times, to celebrate small victories together, to share our fears and hopes and dreams. Your story about the musicians resonates, because that's exactly what we've done here, found a way to create harmony out of diversity, to make beautiful music together despite our differences. Louis with his endless weather stories, Carlos with his guitar and folk songs, Miguel with his card tricks and jokes, Dr. Mendoza with his quiet wisdom about human nature. Each of us has contributed something essential to the whole. I think about the lessons this experience has taught me about love, about commitment, about the difference between choosing someone in easy times and choosing them when times are hard. These months have tested our relationship in ways I never expected, not by putting us in conflict with each other, but by seeing whether love could survive across such vast distances and long silences. It has survived, my darling. More than survived, it has grown stronger, deeper, more intentional. I love you not just because of how you make me feel when we're together, but because of who you are when we're apart. Your letters have revealed depths of wisdom, compassion, and strength that I'm still discovering. You've been my partner not just in romance, but in the work of becoming a better human being. The sun is fully back now, shining almost 20 hours a day as we head toward the Antarctic summer. The ice is beginning to change color, from the deep blue-white of winter to the brighter, more varied tones that come with direct sunlight. In 3 weeks, the ship will arrive to take us home, and this strange, beautiful, difficult chapter of our lives will be over. I'm eager to return to you, eager to hold you and hear your voice, and share all the things that can't be captured in letters. But I'm also grateful for this time of separation, for what it has taught us about love and strength, and the surprising capacity of the human heart to find connection across any distance. When I see you at the Santiago airport, I'll be carrying more than just my luggage and my samples of ancient ice. I'll be bringing everything this place has taught me about patience and endurance, and the way love can survive in the most unlikely conditions. I'll be bringing a deeper appreciation for ordinary warmth, ordinary light, ordinary days spent in the presence of the person who matters most. Soon, my love, very soon now. With all my heart, Mateo. The final weeks at Yelcho Station passed with the strange combination of excitement and melancholy that marks the end of any intense shared experience. The men worked tirelessly to pack up their equipment and samples, to secure the station for the winter caretaker crew that would arrive with the supply ship, and to complete the 1,000 small tasks that would allow them to leave their temporary home in good condition. But beneath the practical urgency was an undercurrent of emotion that surprised everyone. Despite the hardships, the conflicts, and the long months of darkness and cold, they had created something meaningful together. They had proven to themselves and each other that humans could live in harmony, even under the most challenging conditions, that isolation and hardship could bring out the best rather than the worst in people. The supply ship Piloto Pardo arrived on schedule in early November, her red hull brilliant against the white ice, her diesel engines the first mechanical sound from the outside world that the men had heard in over a year. The ship brought fresh food, clean clothes, news from home, and most importantly, the promise of return to the warm world they had left behind. Loading their samples and equipment took 2 full days. The ice cores had to be kept frozen during the journey home, requiring special refrigerated containers and careful handling. The scientific instruments had to be cleaned, calibrated, and packed with materials that would protect them from the vibration and humidity of the sea voyage. On the final morning at Yelcho Station, the 12 men gathered in the common room where they had spent so many evenings reading letters, playing cards, sharing stories, and waiting for the endless winter to end. Lewis, as the senior man on the expedition, gave a brief speech thanking everyone for their dedication and cooperation. Dr. Mendoza offered a toast with the last bottle of wine they had been saving for this moment, but it was Mateo who found the words that captured what they had all experienced. We came here as strangers, brought together by work and circumstance. We're leaving as brothers, connected by something deeper than professional obligation. We've learned that humans can create warmth even in the coldest place on Earth, that community can flourish even in isolation, that love, whether romantic love or the love between friends, can survive any test if we're willing to tend it carefully. He paused, looking around at faces that had become as familiar as family, then added quietly, "We've also learned that home isn't just a place you leave and return to. It's something you carry inside you, something you can create anywhere there are people willing to care for each other." This station has been our home for over a year, and part of it will always live in our hearts. The journey home took 8 days, with stops in Argentina and several Chilean ports before the Piloto Pardo finally docked in Valparaiso. For Mateo and his companions, it was a gradual reintroduction to the world they had left behind. The smell of diesel fuel and fresh bread, the sound of seabirds and car engines, the sight of green plants and colors other than white and blue. But the real homecoming would happen in Santiago, where families and loved ones waited at the airport with flowers and tears and embraces that had been postponed for over a year. Sofia had spent the final week before Mateo's return in a state of nervous anticipation that surprised her with its intensity. She cleaned their apartment 3 times, bought new sheets for the bed, filled the refrigerator with his favorite foods, and changed her clothes 4 times on the morning of his arrival. The woman who had sustained herself and her beloved through months of separation with nothing but words on paper suddenly felt shy about the prospect of seeing him face to face. At Jorge Newbery Airfield, she waited with the other families behind a rope barrier, clutching a bouquet of sunflowers, his favorite flower, and trying to control the trembling in her hands. When the door of the military transport plane opened and the men began to descend the steps, she recognized Mateo immediately despite the beard he had grown, and the way the Antarctic sun had darkened his skin. Their reunion was everything their letters had promised, and more. They held each other without speaking for several minutes, both crying tears that carried 14 months of longing and relief and joy. Around them, similar scenes played out as other couples and families celebrated the end of their long separation. "You feel different," Sofia whispered against his shoulder, meaning the way his body had changed, leaner and harder from the physical demands of Antarctic life. "You feel like home," he whispered back, meaning everything That night, in their apartment that Sofia had kept exactly as he had left it, they sat together on the couch and tried to bridge the gap between their shared correspondence and their physical reunion. There was awkwardness at first. They had been apart longer than they had been together, and both had changed in ways that letters couldn't fully capture. But gradually, as they talked through the night, they found their way back to the intimacy they had maintained through words. Sofia read aloud from some of her favorite passages from his letters, and Mateo shared details about life at the station that he had never written down. They were rediscovering each other, learning to be together again after months of loving each other from a distance. "I was afraid sometimes," Sofia admitted as dawn light began to filter through their bedroom windows. "Afraid that the person I was falling in love with through your letters might be different from the person who came home." And Mateo asked, stroking her hair, "And you're both the same and different. The same heart, the same soul, but deeper somehow. Like you've been to a place that taught you things about yourself that you couldn't learn here." She was right. The months at Yelcho Station had changed Mateo in fundamental ways. He was more patient now, more appreciative of simple comforts, more aware of how much he needed human connection and love. The extreme isolation had stripped away many of the distractions and anxieties that had once seemed important, leaving him with a clearer sense of what truly mattered. But the most profound change was in his understanding of love itself, the experience of maintaining their relationship across such vast distances and long silences had taught him that love was not just a feeling, but a choice, not just an emotion, but a commitment to the daily work of caring for another person, even when they weren't physically present. Their wedding took place 3 months later, in the spring of 1959, in a small ceremony attended by both families and all 11 of Mateo's companions from Yelcho Station. Louis served as best man, and in his toast at the reception, he said something that perfectly captured what the expedition had taught them all. "Mateo and Sofia have proven that love can survive anything: distance, time, hardship, separation. But more than that, they've shown us that love isn't diminished by difficulty. It's refined by it, purified by it, made stronger and more beautiful." The ice core samples that Mateo and his team had extracted from Antarctica provided data that contributed to some of the most important climate research of the 20th century. Their work helped establish the scientific foundation for understanding global warming and climate change, contributing to research that would eventually influence environmental policy around the world. But for Mateo, the most important discovery he brought back from Antarctica wasn't scientific. It was a deeper understanding of human resilience, of the capacity for love to transcend any obstacle, of the way shared hardship can create bonds that last a lifetime. He and Sofia went on to have 3 children and 47 years of marriage. He became a professor at the University of Chile, specializing in paleoclimatology, and she continued her work in literature, eventually writing a book about the role of letter writing in maintaining long-distance relationships during the age before instant communication. They never forgot those 14 months when their love existed primarily in words on paper, traveling impossible distances across ice and ocean and time zones to keep their hearts connected. They kept every letter they had written to each other, storing them in a wooden box that sat on their bedroom dresser like a treasure chest. On their wedding anniversaries, they would take turns reading the letters aloud to each other, remembering the people they had been during that time of separation, honoring the love that had sustained them through the longest winter of their lives. Their story became legendary among Antarctic researchers, passed down through generations of scientists who would follow them to the bottom of the world. It became proof that the human heart was as resilient as any scientific instrument, as capable of surviving extreme conditions as any technological equipment. The letters themselves, donated to the Chilean Antarctic Institute after Sofia's death in 2006, are now preserved in a climate-controlled archive where they serve as both historical documents and testimony to the power of love to transcend any distance, any hardship, any challenge that life can present. But perhaps the most beautiful legacy of their correspondence is not preserved in any archive. It lives in the countless other couples who have read their story and been inspired to believe that love can survive anything, that separation is temporary, but connection can be eternal, that the human heart can find ways to reach across any void if it's willing to speak honestly and listen carefully and trust in the power of words to carry the deepest truths. Mateo died peacefully in 2011 at the age of 88, holding Sofia's hand and looking at the wedding photograph that had sat on his nightstand for 52 years. His last words were reportedly a whispered "thank you," though whether he was speaking to Sofia, to the life they had shared, or to the Antarctic experience that had taught him how to love so deeply, no one could say. The truth is probably that he was thanking all of them, the ice and the darkness and the letters, and the woman who had waited for him through the longest winter, who had loved him across impossible distances, who had shown him that the human heart was capable of creating warmth, even in the coldest places on Earth. Today, Yelcho Station still stands on its rocky outcrop in Antarctica, though it's now automated and visited only occasionally by researchers and maintenance crews. The common room where 12 men once gathered to read letters from home is empty most of the time, filled with scientific equipment and the quiet hum of modern technology. But on clear nights, when the aurora australis paints the sky in curtains of green and blue light, visitors sometimes report hearing whispers in the wind, fragments of conversations, echoes of laughter, the rustle of paper being unfolded by hands that remember when letters were the only connection to everything warm and human and alive. They are the whispers of love that transcended the coldest place on earth, of words that traveled impossible distances to keep hearts connected across the vast white emptiness of Antarctica. They are the whispers of a story that reminds us that no distance is too great for love to cross, no separation too long for the human heart to endure, no winter so dark that spring will not eventually return. And in those whispers, carried on the endless Antarctic wind, the love between Mateo and Sofia continues to speak to anyone brave enough to listen, offering proof that the most powerful force on earth is not ice or stone or steel, but the simple human capacity to love someone so deeply that neither time nor distance nor hardship can diminish it. 50 years after Mateo's return from Antarctica, a young graduate student named Carmen Reyes was working in the archives of the Chilean Antarctic Institute when she stumbled upon the wooden box containing the complete correspondence between Mateo and Sofia Herrera. The box had been donated to the Institute following Sofia's death, along with Mateo's field notes and scientific papers from the Yelcho Station expedition. Carmen was researching the psychological aspects of Antarctic isolation for her thesis in psychology. But what she found in those carefully preserved letters went far beyond her academic interests. She found herself staying late in the archive reading room, drawn into the intimate story of two people who had managed to maintain and deepen their love despite being separated by thousands of miles and months of darkness. The letters revealed not just a love story, but a masterclass in human resilience, emotional intelligence, and the art of maintaining connection across vast distances. They showed how two people could grow individually while remaining committed to their shared future, how they could support each other through difficult times without being physically present, how they could use words to create intimacy and understanding that transcended the limitations of paper and ink. Carmen's thesis, titled Love Letters from the Ice, Communication and Connection in Extreme Isolation, became the definitive academic study of the Herrera correspondence. But more than that, it sparked a broader interest in the role of written communication in maintaining relationships during periods of separation. The story began to spread beyond academic circles when Carmen wrote a popular article about the letters for a national magazine. The article struck a chord with readers who were dealing with their own experiences of separation. Military families, immigrants separated from loved ones, couples navigating long-distance relationships in an era of global mobility. Letters began arriving at the Chilean Antarctic Institute from around the world, from people who had been inspired by Mateo and Sofia's story to examine their own relationships, to appreciate the people they loved more deeply, to believe that love could survive whatever challenges life might present. A documentary filmmaker named Patricia Guzman created an award-winning film about the letters, using dramatic readings by Chilean actors combined with stunning footage of Antarctica to tell the story of love, persevering in the world's most isolated place. The film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and was later broadcast on television networks around the world, introducing millions of people to the story of the couple who had proven that love could survive anything. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to Mateo and Sofia's legacy came from an unexpected source. The current crew at Yelcho Station, now expanded to 25 researchers from multiple countries, began a tradition of reading selections from the Herrera letters aloud during their monthly community meetings. Dr. Alina Vasquez, the station commander, explained the tradition in a report to the Chilean Antarctic Institute. The letters remind us why we're here, not just to conduct research, but to push the boundaries of human experience, to learn about ourselves and our planet and our capacity for connection, even in the most challenging circumstances. Mateo and Sofia's words help us remember that we're part of a long tradition of people who have chosen to come to this difficult place in service of knowledge and discovery. The tradition has spread to other Antarctic research stations, creating a network of communities around the continent who share the story of the couple whose love transcended the coldest place on Earth. During the long polar nights, when researchers from different countries gather around radios to share news and maintain connections across the vast ice sheet, the letters are often read as reminders of home, love, and the enduring power of human connection. In 2018, on the 60th anniversary of Mateo's return from Antarctica, the Chilean Post Office issued a special stamp series commemorating the Yelcho Station expedition and the love letters that had sustained one of its members through the longest winter of his life. The stamps featured images of the Antarctic landscape, the original Yelcho Station, and elegant script samples from the actual letters. The most meaningful commemoration, however, was simpler and more personal. Carmen Reyes, now Dr. Carmen Reyes, and a professor of psychology specializing in relationship resilience, organized a reading of the complete letter correspondence at the University of Chile. The reading took place over 3 days, with faculty, students, and community members taking turns reading the letters in chronological order. Many of the original Yelcho Station team members, now elderly men in their 80s and 90s, attended the reading. Louis, the meteorologist who had served as Mateo's closest friend during the expedition, was 92 and the last surviving member of the original 12. He listened to the letters with tears in his eyes, remembering the young couple whose love had provided light during the darkest months at the bottom of the world. I knew those letters were special when Mateo first read them to us, Louis said during the ceremony. But I didn't know they would still be touching hearts 60 years later. That's the thing about true love. It doesn't fade with time. If anything, it grows more beautiful as the years pass. The reading concluded with a moment of silence for Mateo and Sofia. For all the couples who have loved each other across vast distances, and for all the people who have chosen to venture into difficult and isolated places in service of knowledge, discovery, and human understanding. The letters themselves, carefully preserved in their climate-controlled archive, digitized for researchers around the world, translated into multiple languages, continue to speak to new generations of readers who find in them proof that love is stronger than distance, deeper than hardship, more enduring than time itself. They whisper to us from the bottom of the world, these letters written by lamplight in a place where darkness reigned for months at a time. They remind us that the most important journeys are not always the ones we take through physical space, but the ones we take through the landscape of the human heart. They teach us that love is not a feeling that comes and goes with circumstances, but a choice that we make every day. The choice to reach across whatever distances separate us, to speak honestly about our fears and hopes and dreams, to believe that connection is possible, even when physical presence is not. And they promise us, these whispers in the snow, that no winter lasts forever, that spring always returns, that love can survive any separation if we're willing to tend it carefully and trust in its power to overcome whatever obstacles life places in its path. The last entry in Sofia's diary, written just days before her death in 2006, captures the enduring power of their correspondence. Today, I reread our letters from Antarctica, all 127 of them. The paper is yellowing now, and my handwriting looks young and eager to my old eyes. But the love in those words is as fresh as the day we wrote them. Distance didn't diminish it. Time didn't fade it. If anything, 50 years of marriage proved that the love we discovered through those letters was strong enough to last a lifetime. Mateo often said that Antarctica taught him about love, but I think it was the other way around. Love taught us about Antarctica, about how to survive in impossible conditions, about how to find warmth in the coldest places, about how to believe in spring, even in the depths of winter. Whoever reads these words in years to come, know this. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. It can cross any distance, survive any hardship, overcome any obstacle. All it requires is two hearts willing to speak honestly to each other, to listen carefully, and to trust that connection is possible even when physical presence is not. The letters from Antarctica changed our lives, but more than that, they showed us what we were capable of when we loved each other completely. That lesson has guided us through 50 years of marriage, 3 children, countless challenges and joys, and ordinary days that became extraordinary because we shared them together. Love letters are not just communication. They are promises. They are prayers. They are proof that the human heart is capable of creating light in any darkness, warmth in any cold, hope in any despair. May everyone who reads our story find their own Antarctic, their own test of love's endurance, and may they discover, as we did, that love always finds a way. And so our story comes to rest, not with an ending, but with a beginning. The beginning of understanding that love like Mateo and Sofia's is not just possible, but necessary. Not just inspiring, but instructive. Not just beautiful, but essential to everything that makes us human. Their letters continue to whisper from the archives, from the windswept expanses of Antarctica, from the hearts of everyone who has ever loved someone across impossible distances. They remind us that we are all connected by invisible threads of affection and understanding that are stronger than steel, more durable than stone, more enduring than ice. In a world that often feels cold and distant and isolated, the whispers in the snow promise us that warmth is possible, that connection is real, that love is the force that makes all other forces bearable and all journeys worthwhile. Sleep well, dear listeners, and dream of love letters traveling across impossible distances, carrying hearts home to each other through the gentle darkness, whispering promises that time cannot diminish and distance cannot break. The snow continues to fall at Yelcho Station, but beneath it all, the love between Mateo and Sofia burns on like an eternal flame, lighting the way for all of us who seek to love deeply, purely, and without reservation in this beautiful, difficult, magnificent world we share.